Hi everybody, welcome back to the final video in our 8-part series on the Charity Investment Governance Principles. These are a set of principles that have been put together by charities, and they were led by a steering group that consisted of the Charity Finance Group, NCVO, WCVA, ACF and the Charities Responsible Investment Network. And the project was funded by a group of philanthropic foundations. The principles focus on the practice in England and Wales and the regulatory requirements there, but we are hoping that this will be useful for those that are further afield as well. So Principle 7 today, openness and accountability. And for those that haven't seen the first 7 videos, please find the recordings that are stored at broadstone.co.uk. You can watch back and follow up on any of the content that you've missed. So as usual, I am joined by Gail Cunningham, who led on the development of these principles. And Gail, can we just focus to start with on how these principles build on what is already required for charities?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously CC14, which is the guidance from the Charity Commission on Investments, and also the SORP, the Statement of Recommended Practice, which actually applies across the whole of the UK around what charities should include in their accounts. Those are obviously already out there, and the SORP in particular has different requirements based on the size of the charity and so on. And so we wanted to just build on that. We didn't want to put lots of additional requirements onto charities. So there's obviously what's already required of your charity by those, and then it's looking at what you might want to record within your annual report or within your investment policy where you're publishing that, around why the charity holds investments, how you're addressing conflicts with the purposes or the reputational risks, the governance structure. Do you have a finance and investment committee if you're a larger charity who've got more complicated investments, and trustee oversight and so on. And then also looking at, do you need an appendix that looks at perhaps the professional providers that you're using, or if your charity is making social investments, how is that information published? So we're looking at what might charities want to publish, want to include, that perhaps goes beyond what's explicitly required in the SORP or in CC14, but that's not too onerous on charities.
Yeah, and really, Gail, this principle is here to help build that trust and confidence in the charity by providing accessibility and accountability. And as advisors, we're supporting charities with writing their investment policies, and these policies have been highlighted in other principles. But could you maybe just spend a couple of minutes focusing now on how this can help supporting the overall principle of openness?
Absolutely. And so obviously an investment policy really sets out what the charity intends to achieve through its investments and how it intends to do that. And I would say that other principles, particularly Principle 4 around decision-making, risk and control, has a lot of detail about investment policies. And there's also a standalone section with some examples on investment policies. And again, to bang on about the feedback, if your charity has a really great investment policy, pop us a note through the provide feedback so we can include you as one of the examples of investment policies. The one thing I would say, we have recommended that ideally charities would publish their full investment policy on the website, or if that's not possible, how are they making sure that a simplified version is published perhaps within the annual report or on the website? It was interesting, as part of all of the focus groups and conversations we had around this, we came across some charities who said, well, our investment policy is 74 pages long. How on earth could we publish that? And that was a really interesting moment, because of course that made us go, well, hang on a sec, did the trustees actually understand, have all of your trustees read this 74-page document? So I think it's really important to look at this for openness and accountability, both internally, making sure all of the trustees understand the investment policy, know what's in the investment policy, have had a chance to read and review that. And then also openness and accountability externally. What are you publishing about your investments, and letting your stakeholders know what your intentions are through your investment policy and other materials you might want to publish relating to the charity's investments?
Yeah, I love that. And I love the internal and external view of that openness and accountability. And ultimately, it sort of feeds into language as well that's being used to make sure everybody's able to understand and clearly see what the objectives of those investments are. So, the key pillar here is building trust and confidence. And as you said, that's both internally and externally. So what levers do you think charities can use to support this openness?
Absolutely. So as we already said, there's that issue of, do you publish a full investment policy? What information are you publishing about the charity's investments? We've also got some pointers in there around sharing with peers, where you might want to compare practice with other organisations in the charity sector that are similar to yours. What does their practice look like, and so on. And obviously the membership networks who are part of the steering group for this project provide lots of opportunities to do that sharing, be that through Charity Finance Group, the Association of Charitable Foundations, NCVO, WCVA, and so on. There's also a piece around communicating with stakeholders, and this came up a lot in the focus groups, because for some charities they have a number of different stakeholder groups who are all very interested in what's going on in the investments, and that can be quite a challenge to manage. For other charities, their stakeholders don't even necessarily know that the charity holds investments. And so what does it look like depending on who your key stakeholders are, and how do you have a plan for communicating with them? This doesn't automatically mean you share absolutely everything about your investments with every stakeholder and they're all involved in your decision making. That would go against the good practice on delegation and decision making that we saw in the other principles, but more about what is your agreed process for communicating about the charity's investments. And if you get feedback back, do you have a process and a route for dealing with that feedback when it comes back in?
Yeah, and I think that this is a really important principle here, and it's nice that it sort of summarises exactly all of the other principles and how that they can be recorded and shared amongst all the stakeholders of charity organisations. So I guess that wraps up our final episode, but I'll just finish off by saying that the principles, although these are not a legal or regulatory requirement, and they're not an attempt really to set out the legal requirements, their focus is to be a tool to support you in executing the Charity Commission's CC14 guidance on investing charitable money. And it's here, we'll put the link on this video where you can see the legal requirements and the regulatory expectations in England and Wales around investments. And if you want to head to broadstone.co.uk, you'll be able to watch any of the videos that you haven't managed to watch yet. This is episode 8 of an 8-part series. And if you go to cigp.org.uk, that is where you will be able to find these principles in full. So I just want to thank Gail, not only for working on these principles so diligently, but helping to bring together so many stakeholders, and really importantly for taking the time to film this series with me. Thank you. And for anybody looking for investment advice on their investments, then please do feel free to reach out to me directly through either our website, broadstone.co.uk, or on LinkedIn. I'm really happy to support. So thanks everybody for following. Looking forward to the next series, Gail.